Hey guys, my name is Faustina Gorham, and I'm just a 24-year-old girl who has fallen in love with the writings Jesus gave to his servant of God, Luisa Picaretta, the writings he calls the Book of Heaven, the call to the creatures to the order, to the place, and to the purpose for which they were created by God. In these writings, Jesus describes the state of union with God that Adam and Eve had before the fall. And in these Vatican-endorsed writings, Jesus tells Luisa that now is the time in history for mankind to not only be redeemed, but to be completely restored. He tells Luisa that he has chosen her to be the first soul born in original sin, to be able to enter back into the state of original justice, and that after her, any of us can enter once again into this great gift as well. The state of not only doing God's will, like the saints before us, but to be able to take the next step and live in his will, which is the state of union with God that the souls in heaven currently enjoy. But now we can have it on earth too. On earth as it is in heaven. On earth as it is. Does that sound like a particular prayer that the church has been praying for the past 2,000 years? It is. Jesus tells Luisa that this gift of living in the divine will is the ultimate fulfillment of the Our Father prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That prayer will not be prayed in vain. It will come to pass, and it has already begun to come to pass in Luisa and in the souls after Luisa who take hold of this gift. In these writings, Jesus teaches us all about what this state of union consists of, how to dispose our hearts to be able to enter into it, and how to conduct ourselves in it. I found these writings just about exactly 4 years ago to this day, and they have radically transformed my life. The gift of living in the divine will is the reason for my invincible joy, and I feel called by God to shout it from the rooftops. If you are new to the divine will, I would suggest you watch my introductory videos I made before this one, because I made these videos intending for them to build off of each other. There are links to them in the description. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the hours of the Passion, why they're so important, and what they are, and how we can get the most benefit out of them. If you're not familiar, Hours of the Passion was written by Jesus through Luisa. She wrote the Hours of the Passion while she was writing volume 11 of the Book of Heaven. But basically, it's an incredibly detailed account of Jesus's passion, really what was happening at each and every hour, starting at 5 p.m. Thursday night. Jesus takes leave of his most holy mother. And this is talking about not only what's happening exteriorly in the details of that, but also, and more importantly, what's happening with Jesus interiorly as all of these things are happening. This is showing us how he is operating interiorly in the gift of the divine will, because he's doing infinite wonders the whole entire time. And yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I have fallen so deeply in love with Jesus because of these. Like, I think this just really opened my eyes to understand, like, just how much he suffered. I don't know if any of you have seen the Passion of the Christ movie, and it is pretty hard for a lot of people to watch. It was really hard for me to watch, but I've seen it multiple times. We usually watch it on Good Friday. My family, it's a tradition. But it's very gruesome. It's more gruesome than they usually go into detail of with, other movies or depictions of the Passion. Like, he didn't have like a little bit of blood dripping down. He didn't get like lashed a little bit. It was his entire body was nothing but blood and wounds. And that movie really is depicts some gruesome things. But after watching that movie, I thought that was pretty bad. But then after reading the Hours of the Passion, I realized that movie was nothing. Like, nothing. Even exteriorly, like what was happening to him exteriorly was so much worse than even that movie depicted. It's really, we are able to know what Jesus did for us, truly the extent of it, in these writings. And not only that, but we are able to see the inside of his heart and exactly what was going through his mind at every moment, and how much it was all for us, pure love. It is impossible to read these consistently with an open heart and not be utterly transformed. There are many promises that Jesus makes to Louisa about what he will give for souls for reading these hours of the Passion. One of those promises is that chastisements will be lessened in the areas in the cities in which these hours of the Passion are being prayed by souls. And so there is, I will leave a link to this as well. There is such a thing, it's called a Hours of the Passion clock, where you can sign up to dedicate to read yourself to read one of these reflections every day, and you'll be on a team with other people, because somebody else on your same clock will be assigned to read the 6 to 7 hour, while you're assigned to read the 5 to 6 hour, and so on with all the 24 hours, and they end at 4 p.m. on Friday, so after the burial of Jesus. The goal is with this clock, with this Hours of the Passion clock, is to get as many people praying these hours as possible, so that chastisements will be averted all over the world. This is incredible reparation to the Father, to divine justice. Jesus tells Louisa that a soul who prays these writings, who prays these hours of the Passion in his will, with his own reparations, with his own love, which he will give to you, right, if you ask for it, and let him in. He promises that a soul will be saved through every word of this that is prayed. This is how powerful these hours of the Passion are. And this is also, like, going across all time, past, present, and future. Like, he tells Louisa that this is when souls living in the divine will pray these hours of the Passion, his own life, his own sufferings are being repeated constantly. The merits of his passion are being enacted over and over and over again, just as the soul in the divine will intends to. And of course, in the past videos where I talked about this before, we know this is the case, and it's possible because when a soul is living in the divine will, everything, all of eternity is inside them, everything Jesus ever did, past, present, future, everything is in you, and so you possess it. And so when you, specifically when you intentionally pray these hours of the Passion, when you have the gift of the divine will, it's you're another Christ he is repeating his passion from within you, even though you're not suffering anything. It is incredible. He is utterly ridiculous in his generosity and his love for souls, and the least we can do is to make great use of his promises, of everything that he wants, everything that he promised to give us through these hours of the Passion, and pray them often, and love them, and console Jesus in these hours. He says that a soul who prays these hours of the Passion is his angel of consolation. Like, he actually felt, going back in time, like he felt deeply consoled, and he felt like he wasn't alone. When souls enter into these hours, we bilocate, we time travel back to that time, and we're actually with Jesus. He wants us to know all of the intimate details of how much he loves us, because, like I said, it is impossible to not fall in love with Jesus if you are reading these. Absolutely impossible. Even if you're very new to the divine will, or you don't feel like you're ready to give up your attachments to sin or to anything, but if you have the heart to at least want to read these writings, I'm telling you, like, little by little, these writings will infuse into your heart a strong hatred for any sin. You will begin to realize just what sin is, because you see it. You see exactly what it does to Jesus. You see exactly, he tells you the specific things he suffered interiorly and exteriorly for specific sins. So this is the ultimate reality check. You'll just love him so much, and you'll see how much he loves you. I get asked the question a lot, like, how do you live in the divine will in everyday life? Like, what does it look like practically? And honestly, I think reading these hours of the Passion with the intention that they will teach you how to live in the divine will practically in everyday life, then you will be able to quickly soar in the divine will. If you seriously are applying this to your life, if you're seriously internalizing this and wanting to make this your life, really what living in the divine will is being a victim soul. And that is a word that this is a pun, I want to destigmatize that word, because a lot of people, they hear that word and they're like, oh, victim soul, that's bad. Yeah, being a victim soul is not only for the few souls who are called to be like Louisa, to receive the stigmata in their hands and feet, or the invisible stigmata, or to feel mystical pains of Christ, or even to be sick with something in bed, like bedridden, with a natural disease. Souls can be victim souls and not be called to that kind of intense suffering of a life. We are all actually called in the divine will to become living hosts. And yeah, when we are transformed into that living Eucharist, going back to the videos that I did before this, like really in essence, if you think about it, we become another Jesus. And as we grow in fullness in the gift, and the more those threads, right, remember from the Eucharist are thread into us, the container, the cup, then the more we blossom into that identity and we become another Jesus. And who is Jesus? What was his mission and his identity on earth? He was a victim soul, and we are all invited into that. And actually there is no living in the fullness of the divine will without becoming a victim soul. And yeah, like I said, these writings will teach you how to do that in everyday life. In particular, in these reflections and practices section at the end of each of the hours. They were written by Saint Hannibal de Francia, who is Louisa's spiritual director. So Louisa wrote the actual hours, which were dictated to her by Jesus, but St. Hannibal wrote the Reflections and Practices section. I'll read you his reflection from the 3 a.m. hour, when Jesus was in the house of Caiaphas, falsely accused. So this is an example of how to live in the divine will, practically in everyday life. Jesus, presented to Caiaphas, is unjustly accused and subjected to unheard of tortures. Questioned, he always says the truth. And we, when the Lord allows that we be slandered and unjustly accused, do we look only for God, who knows our innocence, or do we rather beg esteem and honor from creatures? Does truth always arise on our lips? Are we averse to any trick and lie? Do we bear with patience the mockeries and the confusions that creatures give us? Are we ready to give our life for their salvation? Oh, my sweet Jesus, how different I am from you. Please let my lips always speak the truth so as to wound the heart of those who listen to me and lead everyone to you. So that's one example of, how to handle a situation when somebody, it is going to happen in life. Somebody is going to misrepresent you. Somebody is going to slander you, even if it's in a small way. What do you do with that? You're supposed to, these hours of the Passion teach you how to allow Jesus to relive his redemptive life of what he experienced when Caiaphas unjustly accused him. He took that, and he didn't fight back. He didn't try to defend himself and to assert his rights. He took it. He was peaceful. He was calm. He was patient, and he offered the pain of the slander, of the misunderstandings, for the salvation of Caiaphas and for the others and for everyone who was hurting him. If we want to live in all the fullness of the divine will, then we need to have the attitude that this needs to be our shift, that our life now becomes, when bad things happen to us, we are offering ourselves for others. We are offering ourselves for their salvation, and we are patient and calm with them. Even if we do, like I said in my What It Means to Be Detached video, and to lose all your rights, like sometimes you will, stand up for yourself. But even in that case, you would do it with the same attitude, though, with the same detachment interiorly that Jesus had, if that makes sense. Like you would still offer it, like, for their salvation. You would be peaceful, you would be calm, and you would be okay with being ridiculed like that, because your life is Jesus. You are desiring to be all lost in him, to let him live his life again through you. And like I said, this is the goal. This is what these hours of the Passion and living in the divine will bring us to as we grow towards the fullness, towards the perfection of it. And so none of this should be discouraging to you. None of this, like, these reflections and practices, they're kind of like, honestly, you can use these as an excellent and very beautiful and detailed examination of conscience, for living in the divine will. But Jesus does not need you to already be perfect at all of these. in order to begin living in the divine will, in order to receive the gift. No, this is what you're being transformed into. Like, we are all weak. We are all learning. Jesus is the one that has that perfect love, and he's the only one who could possibly love like that. And so it is a little by little thing. It is a sip by sip thing. The more attentive we are to striving to grow in this likeness of Jesus, in this repeating his life in the divine will, and the more we read these and meditate on them and let them seep into our hearts, into the deepest place in our hearts, then we will be transformed and we will gradually grow into that. So don't be discouraged if you're not there yet. Don't think this isn't for you if you don't think you could ever be there, because I'm telling you, the divine will, it's magic. Like, God can work wonders in a very short amount of time. For anybody who has an open heart to be transformed and who desires it. So do not lose heart. But yeah, these hours of the passion are absolutely the shortcut. These hours of the passion will they will make you soar in the spiritual life so much faster than if you're not reading these hours of the passion and applying these reflections and practices to your life. So just to recap what I said, living in the divine will is becoming another Jesus. It is becoming a living host. It is becoming a victim soul. And these hours of the passion are in my opinion, the quickest way to dispose our hearts to receive the gift. And they are also the quickest way to grow our hearts deeper and deeper to fullness of life in the gift. And I believe this because, yeah, they're really what it is all about is losing ourselves for love. That's what the divine will is. That is how we dispose our hearts to lay down our wills. It's not this servile thing. We're not going to attain the fullness of the gift if our primary goal and desire and intention of wanting that is for ourselves, just reaching a goal, right? Really, what it is about is losing ourselves, pouring ourselves out for the salvation of souls. We don't want to lose our will to get something out of it for ourselves. I mean, we will, and the writings do tell us that, and that is, a very legitimate thing. And Jesus does tell us that for a reason, because it whets our appetite. But really, really deep down at the heart of it, the heart of living in the divine will is for love of the other. And yeah, I think these writings, the hours of the passion, in a particular way, they have the power to ignite, if you have an open heart to it, if you're not blocking the effect of the grace because you're maybe afraid to receive it. But if you're open to it, you will receive the grace from reading these writings of wanting the salvation of souls more than anything in the whole entire world. You will begin to esteem every single soul as more valuable than your own life. Like, you would gladly give your life to save even just one soul. You would gladly suffer 1,000 years just to save one soul. That is a special grace that Jesus wants to give souls who are reading these hours of the passion. And therefore, when he does give you this grace, you will be perfectly disposed, not only to live in the divine will, not only to lay down your will to receive the gift, but to fly into all the fullness of it. That's how I see it. She asked Jesus at one point, I think I mentioned this in some of my other videos, what would be better, like, if a soul is concerned and thinking about their own sanctity and how they can grow in virtue and please God more, all that stuff, like, for their own sanctification, or if a soul forgets about themselves growing in holiness and just is all intent on the salvation of souls. Jesus tells Louisa that second sanctity is a whole lot faster. They will grow so much faster if they're not thinking about how much they're growing and about wanting to grow. If they're only thinking about laying down their life for the salvation of souls, then they will be living at the expense not of their own sanctity, but of Jesus' own sanctity. That's what he tells Louisa. Like, he says, this is a much bigger thing. It's more important for the world. It's more, and it is the sharing in Jesus' own life, really, at the very, very heart of it. I think if we approach the divine will in this mentality of, oh, I want to receive the gift because it will be great for me and I want all the perks and the benefits of it, you might receive the gift, yeah. But if you approach it with having a heart that has been utterly transformed by these hours of the passion. And that should be a specific grace that you're open to and that you're asking for, that God will inflame your heart with a burning desire for the salvation of souls, with his own love for the salvation of souls, and even a burning desire to suffer for the salvation of souls. Like, he will inflame your heart with that desire if you're open to it. And then you will be perfectly disposed, like, no doubt about it, to receive the gift and to fly and soar in the gift far beyond where you would have grown to if you had only been in it thinking about yourself and trying to do it right, you know? Yeah. So yeah, that's a scary thing for a lot of people to think about. And I think that this book can be read much like the Book of Heaven or any spiritual reading. Like, we can read this, we can get the information, and it can touch us. But it can transform us to the extent that we open our hearts to allow our hearts to be transformed by it. And so, yes, if the goal of this is to turn you into another Christ in all of the fullness of the divine will, then you're going to have to open your heart. You're going to have to actually give Jesus permission to inflame your heart with a desire to suffer for the salvation of souls. If you don't do that, then you're not going to receive that grace, because you're going to be holding back a little bit, because that's scary to receive, right? But if you open wide your hearts and say, I want it all, I want to be on fire, give me all of it, then he will actually be able to give you all of it immediately. Like, the first time you read, like, through this book, you know, like, or even just in that instant, like, he doesn't even need the book to do it. Like, he can actually just give you that grace if you just ask for it. And honestly, I want to say that. Just ask for that grace. Just open your heart. It takes courage. It takes a decision, and it will be ultimately, like, your decision if you want to ask for that grace. But I'm telling you, if you ask for that grace, you will fly. And you'll be very, very happy, and nothing will really be able to touch you. And you'll find that these reflections and practices, it's like you're reading something that is describing the life that you're living, hardly without even having to think about it, because at that point, Jesus would have been able to live his whole entire life fully fused in you. And Jesus is talking about, he calls it the baptism of victimhood, when a soul becomes a victim soul. And yeah, like I said before, this does not mean that the soul has to have an angel come down to them from heaven and say, will you be a victim soul and have the stigmata? No, it's actually something that we are all invited into. Like I said, it is allowing Jesus to relive his redemptive life in us, and you can live this in your everyday life. If you are a husband, if you're a mother, if you are in college, if you, like, any kind of life, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a nun. This is for you. And it doesn't even mean that you're going to just automatically have lots of sufferings come into your life. That's possible that could happen. You're offering yourself to be willing to have that happen, but what's most likely going to happen is nothing in your life is going to change exteriorly. You're not going to have more sufferings come to you, but the sufferings that do come to you are going to actually become your joy. They're actually going to be food that you're able to eat, in a sense, to be able to grow and to use to nourish every soul in the whole entire world and to console Jesus. And so this is able to be lived in everyday life. And like I said, the reflections and practices portion of the hours of the Passion give us examples of how exactly this baptism of victimhood can be lived out in everyday life without having the mystical stigmata. Now I'm going to read to you an entry in the writings where a certain priest offered himself to be a victim soul to Jesus, and he had asked Louisa to pray that the Lord would accept him as a victim soul. And this is an example. I'm going to read this because it's an example of somebody who feels this call, feels this stirring, this desire to offer themselves in this way, but they are not. He is not called to live physical suffering. He is not called to live a life that is any different than the vocation that he was already living. And Jesus will tailor it to the person's individual calling in life. I'm going to read this to you. It's from Volume 11, March 8th, 1912. This morning, Father G. offered himself as a victim to our Lord, and I was praying, offering him that he would accept him. Then my always adorable Jesus told me, "My daughter, I accept him wholeheartedly. Tell him that his life will no longer belong to him, but to me, and that I chose him as victim of my hidden life. My hidden life was victim for the whole interior life of man, so it repaired for the bad thoughts, desires, tendencies, and affections. All that the exterior of man does is nothing other than the expression of his interior. If so much evil shows on the outside, what will the interior be like? Therefore, the remaking of the interior of man cost me very much. It is sufficient to say that it took me as long as 30 years. My thought, my heartbeat, breath, and desire were always intent on running close to the thought, heartbeat, breath, and desire of man, in order to repair for them, satisfy for them, and sanctify them. So, I chose him, Father G, as victim for this purpose of my hidden life, and I want all his interior with me, united and offered to me, to satisfy me for the evil interior of other creatures. I choose him for this on purpose, since, being a priest, he knows better than others the interior of the souls, the rottenness and the slime which is in them. From this he can better know how much my state of victim cost me, a state in which I want him to take part, and not only him, but also others whom he will approach. My daughter, tell him of the great grace I give to him by accepting him as a victim, since becoming a victim is equivalent to receiving a second baptism, and with effects even greater than baptism. In fact, it is about rising again in my own life, and since the victim has to live in me and of me, I need to wash him from every stain, giving him a new baptism, and strengthening him in grace, to be able to admit him to live with me. Therefore, from now on, I will consider anything he does as mine rather than his own. So whether he prays, speaks, or works, he will say that these are my things. After this, Jesus seemed to be looking around. And I, what are you looking at, O Jesus? Aren't we alone? And he said, no, there are people. I attract them around you to keep them tightly to me. And I, do you love them? And he, yes, but I would like them to be more nimble, more trusting, more brave, and more intimate with me, with no thought for themselves. They must know that victims are no longer the owners of themselves. Otherwise, they would cancel the state of victim. I think that last portion was very interesting. I think Jesus is pretty clearly speaking to us. I mean, obviously, yeah, Louisa was given a mystical vision of these souls that were attracted around her. And who are the souls that are attracted around Louisa? It's the souls who are reading the book of heaven and who are wanting to live in the divine will. Jesus has attracted us to be around him, and he is telling us here that he wants us to be more nimble, brave, and trusting with him, and confident, and he wants us to be victim souls, really. He wants us to no longer be owners of ourselves, because that's the only way that we can really live this life of the divine will. It is about becoming a victim soul. And you can only become a victim soul if you want to become a victim soul with all your heart, and you will only want that if, like I said, you are reading these hours of the Passion and are seriously begging for the grace to desire suffering for the salvation of souls. If you're begging for the grace to value the salvation of a soul over your own life, over at the cost of anything, that you would want to give your life for the salvation of souls, this is the fiery love that will compel you to make a generous and wholehearted offering of yourself for the salvation of souls. Because you can say, yeah, I want to be a victim soul, or I read this formula and I desire to be a victim soul, much like reading the formula to desire to be in the divine will. But if you don't actually fully have that fire in you, that is with your whole heart wanting this, then Jesus isn't going to be able to actually accept you right there. I mean, it's a start, and he can work with that, bringing you deeper and deeper until you get to that desire. But yeah, I think the shortcut is just to ask for the grace to have that fiery desire, that fiery love that wants to suffer for the salvation of souls and that wants to be a victim soul. And then you will be compelled to make this offering, and then you're going to start flying, and you are going to be more nimble, more confident, more trusting with Jesus, and that's when you're going to stop thinking about yourself. And there's another writing that talks about how victim souls, they no longer feel their evil tendencies, their evil passions, like rising up within them. And this is also, it tells me that souls who go this route, who see themselves in this way, they will fly very quickly in the divine will, because they won't have their inclinations and their desire to lash out and be angry when things don't go their way, because they have already they have this desire of victimhood, and so they're able to fly. And I'm going to read you a passage that expresses that how important and what a huge, incredible grace this baptism of victimhood is. Volume 11, March 13th, 1912. The baptism by fire has effects superior to the baptism by water. Jesus continues to speak about the state of victim, telling me, "My daughter, the baptism at birth is by water. It has the virtue to purify, but not to take away tendencies and passions. On the other hand, the baptism of victim is baptism by fire. Therefore, it has not only the virtue to purify, but also to consume any passion and evil tendencies. I myself baptize the soul bit by bit. My thought baptizes the thought of the victim soul. My heartbeat baptizes her heartbeat. My desire, her desire, and so on. This baptism is done between myself and the soul, according to whether she gives herself to me without ever taking back what she gave to me. This is why, my daughter, you don't feel evil tendencies and such. It comes from your state of victim, and I tell you this for your consolation. So tell Father G to be well attentive, for this is the mission of missions, the apostolate of apostolates. I want him always with me and all intent within me." So this is a really common problem that human beings have, is that when we experience suffering or when something doesn't go our way, then a lot of times we lose our peace. We start to get upset. We don't have joy in the suffering. When people do things that are awful to us, we don't experience joy. Common issue. And I'm going to tell you the reason for that. The reason for any time that we lose our peace, or anytime we feel like the suffering is bearing down upon us, it's because, if you think about it, the desire, something we desire is not going. The thing that we desire more than anything, we're not receiving. But what we know about redemptive suffering is that suffering united to Christ saves souls. And so I just think if our hearts can become inflamed with not only having the salvation of souls be our top priority in our hearts, number one more than anything, which will do a lot of good, but also just completely obliterating that desire, just being a fire in your heart where all you care about is the salvation of souls, is loving God, is all of this. Then when these things come to you, it's a victory for you. You are seeing your goals being achieved, because you're able to offer this for others. And it's kind of when you're lifting weights, when you're working out at the gym, that's a suffering. But if you really have a goal that you want, if you want to achieve, I mean, for me, I was a ballet dancer when I was a kid growing up, and I had this goal that I really wanted to get good. I really wanted, for example, to be able to do the splits, and I knew it was gonna hurt, and I made the decision to stretch every day, and it was painful, and it wasn't fun, but in that pain there was a satisfaction. It was this has a purpose, because my number one desire with this is that my number one desire is not my in the moment comfort. My it's that I want to be able to do the splits, because I want to be able to be cast as the good roles in the ballet, and I want to be able to really dance, and I want to be good at this. And so all of the pain of the ballet classes, it was awful. It was not fun. It was not enjoyable. But at the same time it was, and I wouldn't have chosen anything else. I wanted to push myself to feel that pain, because my desire was so strong for achieving that goal that I had, that nothing else mattered. And the pain was inconsequential. And so, it didn't feel like a burden on me. Oh, I have to feel this pain. I have to go to ballet class and have this agony inflicted on me. No, it's I want to go, and I want to fly. I want to push myself and do what I need to do to have this goal achieved, because the fire was so strong. I want this. And I think it's the same thing. There is a phrase, like, ballet taught me a lot. There's a phrase back when I was a teenager. It was an artsy phrase that I saw on Pinterest, and I was like, oh. And it was a phrase, it was a picture of a ballet dancer, like, bending backwards and having their pointe shoes on and stuff, and then it said, once you control your mind, you can conquer your body. And that was a lesson that I learned back then, and I took to heart, and I experienced it, like, what that really means. It's in the mind, really, it's the will. Like, once you really, really want it, then it's game over. Like, you're gonna conquer it. Like, this is, yeah. And yeah, not, obviously, not to, like, manifest energy, oh, if I want it enough, it's gonna happen, but, like, you know what I mean, you get to that point where, like, the pain doesn't bother you, like, really, even though it does, but it's the same thing in the spiritual life. It's the same thing with this. Like, if you are someone who is experiencing a heaviness, a being weighed down, and kind of having to drag through, like, life and these things you don't enjoy, these sufferings, if you have fears, then it's because that desire isn't strong enough. That's just it. But the great thing about knowing that, like, your desire for the salvation of souls isn't strong enough is that now you know exactly what to ask for. You know exactly what grace to ask Jesus for consistently, and he will give it to you. I'm telling you, it's going to be easy. And once you just give him permission and beg for that desire, like, consistently, you will wake up one day and realize that everything is easy. Like, the mind has conquered the body, and or the will, in this case, the will has conquered your entire life, because your will, which really is your heart, is a flame of love, and it burns away all the sufferings, and it makes everything light and easy. When our number one, absolute, overwhelming, predominant desire is love, is the salvation of souls, is God's glory, then automatically what's going to happen is that we are able to fly through everything. And this is the only way. This is the only way, ultimately, that we are going to get to that place of invincible joy. That is how you find joy in your sorrow, is to have the desire for the salvation of souls be a burning fire in your heart. So ask for that grace. I think most fervent Christians, like, want the salvation of souls, but feel weighed down by suffering, and they don't have that joy and that lightness, and they don't understand what people are talking about when they talk about peace and joy in suffering. But that's just because they haven't opened that scary place to allow Jesus to inflame their desires and change them to be his own. It is a scary thing to do, but once you do it, it's all downhill from there. That's how I see it. What these writings are telling us is that if we are not experiencing peace and joy in all circumstances, and joy does not mean happiness. Joy actually really, it kind of is another word for peace. Like, it doesn't mean that you're going to be laughing and smiling all the time, but a certain impassibility, a certain invincibility in all of these things, even if it makes you cry. Like, if you are not experiencing a peace in these sufferings, and if you are experiencing within yourself overwhelming emotions and passions that want to get angry or to fight back or lash out in any way, then it's because you're not a victim soul. It's because you have not received this grace of baptism of victimhood. So the easy solution, if you are someone who is wanting to find invincible joy in the suffering, if you are someone who doesn't understand how to suffer in peace and you want to, then the answer is to go for this. Go for the gold. This is the winner right here. If you want to be a saint, become a victim soul. And this is the quickest way, and this is really the only way in the end. And the quicker you realize that, the quicker you will fly. And the quicker your problems will leave you, and you will be able to suffer with immense peace and joy. You will be able to have great control over your passions and over your evil tendencies, because it will be no longer the expense of your sanctity, but it will be Jesus's redemptive life in you. He will be doing all the work. He will fuse your heart with his, and his infinite love will be bursting from within your heart, and that's infinite strength. Infinite love is infinite strength. Another thing is that, like, you will have no fear. You will have no fear of the future. You will have no fear of suffering. You will have no anxiety, and you will therefore be utterly free to be able to do whatever God wants you to do. And you won't be up at night worrying about what is going to happen to you. You're not going to have any fear, because perfect love casts out all fear. And the perfect love is the love that lays down your life for your brothers. And it is Jesus reliving his life in you through the gift of the divine will, laying down his life fused with yours for the good of all souls, past, present, and future, then, like, you are in heaven. Like, it's heaven on earth, even if it's just, like, with the intention. If that intention is sincere, like, it is nothing but peace, joy, and happiness from there on out, no matter what things come to you. And you will not be afraid of anything, because you will have goodness. It's just the strength of the love in his heart that he is sharing with you. It's impossible to understand. People will think you're crazy. People will not understand it at all, but it is very, very, very real. And it is the answer. If you are struggling to find joy, if you are struggling with fear and anxiety, if you're struggling with yourself, if you're struggling with being obsessed about how you're doing in the spiritual life, and if you're even struggling with your failures and your the ways that you're not doing well in the spiritual life, because yeah, you will still have problems even after you become a victim soul. That's a whole other thing. Louisa just had her imperfections as well. They keep us humble. But the thing is, you can offer everything that's uncomfortable, even the things about yourself that you don't like, even the things that Jesus shows you about, like, your past sins, like the damage that sin really is. Like, when Jesus shows you your root, your deepest, darkest root of original sin, the thing that you struggle with the most, you can offer that for the salvation of souls, and it makes even that, like, peace and calm. You're not afraid of anything. You're not afraid of going to hell, because you realize it's absolutely never going to happen. You aren't afraid to fail. You aren't afraid to be embarrassed. You're not afraid of any pain at all. You're not afraid of anything, because the only thing in your life is love. You just become a living flame of love. Ooh, that kind of reminds me, there's another devotion you probably would have heard of, and it's called The Flame of Love of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And I really believe that these writings, the writings that Mary gave to Elizabeth Kindleman, pave the way for us to enter into the divine will in this way, because what Mary is teaching Elizabeth, and it's the same thing that Mary taught the children at Fatima, it's the same thing Mary taught St. Bernadette of Lourdes. She is teaching Elizabeth how to be a victim soul in everyday life. And I think this is, if you can get this down, the lifestyle that she was living, and there are actually very easy, like, instructions, simple instructions, not necessarily easy, but yeah, it's a way of a life that is offering yourself out for the salvation of souls. It's very inspiring. It's a lifestyle of prayer and fasting and getting up once a week at night to pray for an hour in the night. I think it's like 2 hours in the night. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. You look into it if you want. If you feel like that you want to live this life of victimhood and you want that flame, because that's what the flame of love is all about. It's becoming victim souls, and it is about just pouring out your whole existence for the salvation of souls, because that's the only thing that matters. That really is what this baptism of victimhood is, and it is what will make you, propel you into growth of fullness in the divine will, is receiving this flame of love, like this flame of love of a complete self-offering for others. Once we lay our lives down in this way, then we just become impenetrable. We begin to blossom, we begin to flourish, and our life becomes ultimately, like, the most fruitful that it possibly can. And you want to get there sooner rather than later. And if you're in the divine will long enough and you persevere long enough, then eventually you will get there. But if you actually really, really start going for that right now, then you're gonna propel in the divine will. Mama Mary will help you. Mama Mary is the only way, really, to make any progress in the spiritual life. Whether you realize it or not, she is, if you know Jesus, it's because she is helping you to know him. And if you get close to her, then she will take you by the hand and make you fly quickly in the spiritual life as well. So she is a very, very, very important part. Highly recommend you consecrate yourself to Mary. There's a 33-day consecration to Mary that St. Louis de Montfort put together. It's wonderful. It's brilliant. We should be praying the rosary every day, and talking to our mother as our real mother, as little children. She is very fun. She's very fun. She's very sweet. She wants to be your mother and your friend. Anyway, she's the other shortcut. I gotta mention that. Anyway, I want to read to you how Mary lived out this baptism of victimhood in her everyday life, because she lived an active life. She was a wife and mother, and I'm going to read to you a section from The Queen of Heaven in the Kingdom of the Divine Will, when Mary is going to visit her cousin Elizabeth. As I became mother of Jesus and your mother, my seas of love redoubled, and unable to contain them all, I felt the need to pour them out, and to be the first bearer of Jesus to the creatures, even at the cost of great sacrifices. But what am I saying? Sacrifices? When one really loves, sacrifices and pains are refreshments. They are reliefs and outpourings of the love one possesses. Oh, my child, if you do not feel the good of sacrifice, if you do not feel how it brings the most intimate joys, it is a sign that the divine love does not fill all your soul, and therefore that the divine will does not reign as queen in you. It alone gives such strength to the soul as to render her invincible and capable of bearing any pain. Place your hand upon your heart, and observe how many voids of love there are in it. Reflect that secret self-esteem, your being disturbed by every slightest adversity, those little attachments you feel to things and to people, that tiredness in good, that bother caused by that which you don't like, are equivalent to as many voids of love within your heart, voids which, like little fevers, deprive you of the strength and of the desire to be filled with divine will. Oh, how you too will feel the refreshing and conquering virtue in your sacrifices if you fill these voids with love. To me, that is expressing just what Jesus was talking about, the baptism of victimhood. It is being filled utterly with the flame of the divine love, and that is when you become unconquerable by disturbances, by pains, by your passions, your tendencies, and the bothers. Like you are victorious in everything, and it is something that we cannot conjure up ourselves. I want to make this point over and over and over again. Like, this is a grace that you can ask for incessantly. Make room in your heart. Have the courage to sincerely desire this gift of desiring to suffer for others, of being filled with full-blown divine love in every corner of your heart. And you will have this conquering power that Mary is talking about. She wants to share this with you. She wants to give you her flame of love. And that's what it really, really is. Now, to close this off, I want to take it all back to how this baptism of victimhood, it's not necessarily about the sufferings that the person literally experiences. What this is really about is the givenness of the person's heart to be willing and to desire to suffer anything for the salvation of souls, right? It's the efficacy of the person's victimhood is not dependent on the pain they're experiencing, but it's dependent on the amount of surrender that they have to God, to suffer anything, to have His will reign in them. And so there's a specific writing in volume 6 where Louisa was complaining that she wasn't suffering and she felt like she wasn't doing any good, but then Jesus told her that it doesn't matter what is actually going on, because all of this it's about the will of God. But if the soul truly has within themselves a desire to suffer, if the soul truly has that flame of love, that baptism of victimhood in them, then it is as if they are always suffering. And this is also another writing, and I talked about this in the 4 Degrees video I made, that when a soul comes to love suffering, when a soul comes to truly love suffering and to treasure it, then Jesus makes that same suffering pass into her will, into her heart as her own possession, so that all of her actions have the same value as if she was always suffering. I think we need to get this through our minds, that it's about the will, not about necessarily what is happening. I want to demonstrate this in St. Faustina's diary, because we can see this here too, this idea this victimhood. It's about the consent and the free offering of the sacrifice. In Notebook 1, this is around the little side thing, 135, entry 135, I guess is what it is. I'm going to read through a few of these. This is when Jesus is inviting St. Faustina to be a victim soul and what she came to experience and understand about what it is to be a victim soul. And I think this is also very encouraging for us because even St. Faustina, and this is of course near the very beginning of her journey, she had barely been in the convent, so she hadn't experienced all that much, but she was feeling very much her misery. She was very much incapable, weak, wretched. She was like, how could this possibly be me? And so we can all relate to her a lot in this. So this is what happened to her, but honestly, we can offer ourselves in this same way if we want to. Entry 135. During the third probation, the Lord gave me to understand that I should offer myself to him so that he could do with me as he pleased. I was to remain standing before him as a victim offering. At first, I was quite frightened, as I felt myself to be so utterly miserable and knew very well that this was the case. I answered the Lord once again, I am misery itself. How can I be a hostage for others? Then Jesus says, you do not understand this today. Tomorrow, during your adoration, I will make it known to you. My heart trembled, as did my soul. So deeply did these words sink into my soul. The word of God is living. When I came to the adoration, my intellect was strangely illumined. A vision passed before the eyes of my soul. It was like the vision Jesus had in the Garden of Olives. First, the physical sufferings and all the circumstances that would increase them. Then, the full scope of the spiritual sufferings and those that no one would know about. Everything entered into the vision. False suspicions, loss of good name. I've summarized it here, but this knowledge was already so clear that what I went through later on was in no way different from what I had known at that moment. My name is to be sacrifice. When the vision ended, a cold sweat bathed my forehead. Jesus made it known to me that even if I did not give my consent to this, I could still be saved, and he would not lessen his graces, but would still continue to have the same intimate relationship with me, so that even if I did not consent to make this sacrifice, God's generosity would not lessen thereby. And the Lord gave me to know that the whole mystery depended on me, on my free consent to the sacrifice given with full use of my faculties. In this free and conscious act lies the whole power and value before his majesty. Even if none of these things for which I offered myself would ever happen to me, before the Lord everything was as though it had already been consummated. She had this vision, this understanding of these sufferings that Jesus was asking her if she would be willing to suffer. We later find out that she did, but even if she didn't actually suffer them, she still would have had the same value, and it would have had the same merit and impact if she had not actually suffered them. It was because her will consented to it, right? And so, and we can do this too. We can go in the chapel and talk to Jesus. If we really want to have this flame of love, we can go through things that could happen to us. We could go through things that we could lose, ways that we are willing to suffer for souls, and say, I give my consent to this. And if you really do it with all your will, with all your heart, and God will give you the grace to, if you're brave enough to want the grace to, then it will be as though it really happens. And this is when you will be able to be set free in that way. And it will be that good for the salvation of souls. I want to read again before I go on. And the Lord gave me to know that the whole mystery depended on me, on my free consent to the sacrifice, given with full use of my faculties. In this free and conscious act lies the whole power and value before his majesty. Even if none of these things for which I offered myself would ever happen to me, before the Lord everything was as though it had already been consummated. I'm going to go on now. At that moment, I realized I was entering into communion with the incomprehensible majesty. I felt that God was waiting for my word, for my consent. Then my spirit immersed itself in the Lord, and I said, do with me as you please. I subject myself to your will. As of today, your holy will shall be my nourishment, and I will be faithful to your commands with the help of your grace. Do with me as you please. I beg you, O Lord, be with me at every moment of my life. Suddenly, When I had consented to the sacrifice with all my heart and all my will, God's presence pervaded me. My soul became immersed in God and was inundated with such happiness that I cannot put in writing even the smallest part of it. I felt that His majesty was enveloping me. I was extraordinarily fused with God. I saw that God was well pleased with me, and reciprocally my spirit drowned itself in Him. Aware of this union with God, I felt I was especially loved, and, in turn, I loved with all my soul. A great mystery took place during that adoration, a mystery between the Lord and myself. It seems to me that I would die of love at the sight of His glance. I spoke much with the Lord without uttering a single word, and the Lord said to me, "You are the delight of my heart. From today on, every one of your acts, even the very smallest, will be a delight to my eyes, whatever you do." At that moment I felt transconsecrated. My earthly body was the same, but my soul was different. God was now living in it with the totality of His delight. This is not a feeling, but a conscious reality that nothing can obscure. To close this off, I want to remind everyone that this kind of life is for the little ones, the most miserable and insignificant helpless children. If you think you could never be a saint like this, then you are actually the perfect candidate. Our Father delights in working the most extravagant miracles in the little ones who know very well that they are misery itself. If you are a little soul, then this message is for you. The time is now. Give Him everything without holding back anything. Be all in. Lose yourself completely in the fire of His love. Because the battle out there is raging, and He needs every soldier in their place. We are in this together. Every one of us matter. So fiat voluntas tua, my fellow soldiers and friends. Let's bring this kingdom of peace down to reign upon earth, even if it costs us everything we have.